I'm just a common, your main man, working hard for the man. Woo, my God, baby, and today we're going to be talking about advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I've had request video submissions for more advanced Dungeons and Dragons AD&D, if you will, baby, videos. So here's one for you. We're going to be talking about secondary skills and even a little bit later permutations of Dungeons and Dragons, how that evolved into skills. But secondary skills were, well, let me give you my impressions at first. When I first got going with Dungeons and Dragons, the first Dungeons and Dragons book I had was AD&D First Edition book, but by the time I had like an understanding of where even to buy them, it was a lot of real groping around in the dark back then. In the ancient days, it was like 1407 when I first got into role-playing games, you understand. And when I found those, the first book I got was Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, and the second book I got, well, I think I got the Player's Guide and the DMG at the same day, and that was, I don't know, I can't remember how much time passed, but there was some amount of time that passed there. So I basically saw secondary skills and non-weapon proficiencies at the same time, and I liked non-weapon proficiencies at the time better because they were more evolved. Secondary skills are far more simplistic, vastly more simplistic. In fact, it would be very difficult to make a skill system more simplistic than that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just not sure how you would go do it. All right. What a secondary skill was basically you had your first edition AD&D, and they brought it over as like an optional kind of gimmick where they preferred novel proficiencies, which I think first appeared in Oriental Adventures AD&D First Edition. So there was a lot of strangeness as to where ideas were born and put out. In those days, it was just sort of a lightning storm of ideas, which is good and bad, because it's like there's like a billion rules in those old AD&D books. It's not like say 3rd edition or up, where the rules are very refined and clear. It's just like, hey, we thought of some new shit, and here you go, and we'll put it in the player's handbook. Why not? Why not extra rules for attacking various types of armor? That one I don't think I've ever seen used. Talk about a lot of extra work. So with secondary skills, it basically go like this, and you could do it one of two ways. You could either roll on a chart that was a D100 chart, and you went 1 to 100, and like if you hit 100 with a double odd, I think you got to roll twice. You'd roll 2 extra times beyond that and keep both results, unless I think you rolled the same thing and then like you got jacked. But that was really interesting because it had a way you could have that. And what it basically was a background. It was basically your background, and for the most part, they made sense, and honestly, they made characters that made way more sense typically than, say, even a 3rd 3.5 or Pathfinder or 4th edition, or maybe even really from what I've seen for 5th edition. 5th edition, I'm a little fuzzier on. Honestly, I've completely given up on the brain trust behind the Dungeons and Dragons brand. I just don't think they understand RPGs. So, that being said, just to sort of give you my biases there, but those old AD&D games, I thought were, by today's standard, absurdly poorly written. But at the time, very, very interesting. And of course, I have those rose-colored glasses, that nostalgia looking back. And like I said before, the secondary skills, I didn't really like them initially because they were so simplistic. They seemed in a way very less official to me at the time, trying to learn the game, and even as a teenager and so forth. I didn't really care for them. And oddly enough, some people would do both. You'd have knowledge proficiencies and you'd have a secondary skill. And again, you could roll those on a chart, and most people would just let you pick one. I can't remember if that was really in there. I mean, they had such conflicting rules and so forth in those days. Who knows? It might have been in there. But I do clearly remember a chart for rolling. And it wasn't just like 100 of them. It was like ones that they thought, the writer thought would be more common. They might have I'm just going to give you a number, like a 6% chance. Where someone there might only have a 1 or 2%. Probably I should have looked up the chart, but it's not really that relevant to discuss exactly what was on there. And some of them were clearly better than others. They were designed to be that way, and they would have like the lower percentage. And your background sort of gave you more. Like, okay, with this background, I'll just say I'm a lumberjack, and you are a scribe. Well, as a lumberjack, let's talk about, okay, so that obviously invites all kinds of background questions. Well, am I up, am I Yukon Jack from the frozen tundra? Or am I a lumberjack from a place that's very warm? That's, you need wood everywhere, more than likely, where you can get it at least, to build all kinds of stuff. So, all the lumberjacks know how to cut a tree down. And moreover, so you kind of stretch it and go, okay, well, the character spends a lot of time outdoors, right? And he chops trees down for a living. So that means he probably has the very bare bone basics of herbalist. He's not an apothecary, he's not an herbalist, but he probably leaves a 3, no, son, you see, and he's not gonna mess with that. He's gonna leave that gimmick alone. However, he might know a bit more about trees. He probably knows a bit more about trees than he does, bushes and so forth. And he probably doesn't know that much about maybe roots, but he probably knows a lot about tree sap. He might know something about the dangerous animals from his region. He's like, oh yeah, I know what wolves are. Oh yes, I know what that sound means. Okay, I know about ants because the ants are on the tree. I don't necessarily know that much, but I know the red ants will bite you. I know that this type of wasp, I might not know the correct name, but that son of a bitch has stung me like 18 times. I remember it. And he's more likely to know the sort of monsters that would inhabit the woodland terrain that he's familiar with. Because he's been out there. Stories are told. He's remembered these things. He understands. And you can make cases. You go, okay, look, I'm a lumberjack. I cut trees down, right? Right. All right. So, spend a lot of time around wood. I think my character should be able to whittle some wood items. I think Game Master probably, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it was sort of taking the background and then fleshing it out more. And you can sort of maybe expand a little bit what your character could do in a way. Like if you were, a game master would be like, whoa, slow down now, brother. But if you're like, okay, let me bring this along with it, or let me bring that along with it, or over here, so you can make your lumberjack deal stand out more, be more unique, but harken back to that root, harken back to that, and sort of show the place in the world. It did a great thing because it largely eliminated the horrendous trope that Dungeons & Dragons has fallen into subsequently. The murderer hobo, psycho hobo, whatever you want to call it. But just terrible. And it just creates a game that's incredibly difficult to believe in and to spend immersion in. And after all, it's exactly what you're trying to do. So that doesn't make any sense. When you take crafts and professions and so forth, as they throw them in there and make them almost useless skills, when in reality, they should be very useful in a lot of ways, and that's what secondary skills did. It's like, all right, look, and it can help make a character very interesting. And be like, yeah, I'm a wizard. And your class kind of factor into it, too, because if you're a wizard, for the most part, you can come up with some concepts where maybe you may have an illiterate wizard, but in later editions, you'd kind of be going into more of what a sorcerer is. But there was no sorcerer then. So you could create that, but for the most part, wizards could read. So, but you could have ended up, you're like, yeah, I'm a lumberjack. My father, his father, his father, his father, and his great aunt were all lumberjacks. She was a big-ass woman. And you're like, okay, well, I'm a wizard, and I'm a lumberjack. Okay, that's kind of a weird deal. And you might, if you're allowed to arrange your stats, if you're not rolling straight down the line, 3d6 is a jack to you, baby! You can watch that video and see all what I'm talking about. And I think it's really interesting to see how that could affect even your very neophyte gamer who in those days really wasn't taught much of role-playing. That could interject all kinds of stuff. You're like, all right, well, I'm a lumberjack and I'm a wizard, but let's say maybe I'm just a big burly dude. Yeah, I rolled this 16. That's my highest stat. I'm going to throw that some bitch of strength. And I have a 15 as well. I'm going to throw that some bitch in my constitution, and I'm gonna only go with a 13 intelligence, which would make all kinds of sense. And you're a good wizard, maybe not the best wizard, but you grew up as a lumberjack. You weren't like 4 studying the arcane rites. You were a lumberjack. You were a hard-working man. You got big, thick forearms. You got the scars to prove it. You have a backstory. You have an interesting character, and you take kind of what a wizard would need to do. You can be a lumberjack that can read. You are a literate lumberjack. You know, you could carve stuff. You could even go in there and like make all these strange carvings with a cult aspect to them, and use those in your magic. You could, you know, like maybe like you just pull out little components. You're like, all right, look, book what the book says for components. This is how I'm gonna do my magic. And you're pulling out these little icons and like something like a person, and you take it and like flick it with your finger, and then boom, like the person like gets hit with it for a D4 +1 magic missile damage. Instead of throwing a missile or whatever, you're kind of like voodoo dolling it, and you're making it more interesting. Maybe, or you take it and you just knock it over, and the motherfuckers fall asleep. Or you might grab like 4 magic pocket, and you might have little animal gimmicks in there. So like you're working this wood carver gimmick, or you take it and like carve things in it, so you're making more intricate spells, more interesting stuff. Or you might take it, look at the guy, hold it, look at him, and he's like, oh, you know. So now we're showing your character is scary, he's intimidating. He's this backwoods rustic wizard, and your character immediately beats the living shit out of in terms of awesomeness. This, oh, well, I was a scribe and studied in the bitch-ass university, and I, wear long robes for no apparent reason, and a dunce hat. You know, like, just grab the wizard and right to the ground, right into the muck with him. And then, like, oh, they got magic, too. So, that right there, boom, right on top of my head, you grab that secondary skill, you had a very interesting backstory that you might not have otherwise thought of. And you can get in a lot of gray areas there too, but well, I was a woodsman, right? So I was out there, so can I swim? And the gun master might be like, yeah, that makes sense to be a swimmer. Maybe absolutely not. That you stay away from water. You know water is dangerous. You know if it's past waist deep, you definitely need to get out of it. But you also might know drop offs, things like that. You know that that rivers are useful for floating your logs downstream, and that's a good thing. But otherwise, these are dangers. So again, so let's review. Your character would know the local monsters of that region. At least by legendary story, you might have seen some things. You might have had to. I mean, you got a goddamn weapon. You might have to nail him with that weapon. And additionally, obviously, the wizard lumberjack. What kind of weapon? He's got what weapon proficiency? It's an axe. I think that that kind of axe you could have treated out would probably be more like a hand axe than a battle axe, even though it's got more of a long gimmick on it. But that would be like the kind of damage I would describe a hatchet. So, it would make every sense in the world, So the game master would be, well, yeah, I mean, technically you could only use a dagger or a dart or a quarterstaff or a sling. I think those are the only weapons you could have. I don't think you could use a club in AD&D, which is kind of ridiculous. It's the easiest weapon in the world to use. But a hatchet, that's a whole new level of weapon. But I think any game master who wasn't, a soldering moron would say, oh yeah, well obviously that's your weapon. Not only or they might just say that's a bonus. So like, just go ahead and your character could use maybe even all axes, like any type of axe. You've been doing that all your life, man. Particularly, because you made this interesting character. Almost all game masters are going to reward that. If you're a shitty game master, you'll penalize or jack that. If you're an outstanding game master, you're going to reward that. This is what I want: an interesting, entertaining, creative character. So, this guy can use axes. You might make him spin his weapon proficiency, but it's straight. You could use a battle axe, a hand axe, a throwing axe, whatever you need to do, because you're very familiar with axes. And it would only make sense that your character should outshine other people with axes. You might let that guy specialize in an axe later. Not that, really, for a wizard, that's not that huge an advantage, because you don't have the hit points, you don't have X, Y, and Z, the THAC0, and so forth. But it causes you to push boundaries of your imagination a bit, as opposed to sit back. And it certainly doesn't reward any kind of real power gaming. Maybe, you could pick this best background or whatever, but it doesn't have an enormous mechanical effect. It has more of a knowledge effect. If your character's not getting an armor class or a hit bonus or something like that, it just makes it a richer, more interesting character. And then you don't really have roles, which in itself is quite nice, you know. Or you might go, okay, you can have a role as opposed to just a flat out no. Go ahead and roll wisdom. Go ahead and roll strength. Go ahead and roll constitution, whatever it is, you know. Uh, even interesting things, like log rolling in the old lumberjack games on the computer. You'd be like, oh, well, actually, uh, I'm a lumberjack. Did you recall this, game master? He's like, well, of course I recall it. That's awesome. You're a lumberjack wizard. And it's like, yes. So, maybe there's like a trap, and there's this whole gimmick of like water, and the evil cleric of Nimrod, the Magnificent, is across like on this island, and no one else can get there because they can't swim, and they're all like, oh, we can't swim over there because we don't know how to swim, or we got plate mail on, or whatever. And you're like, well, hold on, thunk, 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 and you knock that tree down, roll that some bitch in the water, and you start just log rolling over there. How tight of a scene would that be? You'd be like, and you'd be like, yo, you wizard this bitch ass, or your god is bitch ass, and you just throw your action right in the head, natural 20, he dies. If your dice aren't assholes, they'll give you that 20 right then, because that's what's up. Because all of a sudden, and a game master, if a game master jacked him that, don't ever play with him again, because he needs to have his books taken away, thrown into fire along with himself. That would be a horrible play. That would be that'd be amazing. I would fucking mark out and give you like a huge bonus of experience or something like that, because that's awesome. You knock the tree down, you're log rolling to with just what he thought. He had everything. He had everything under cover. He's got the whatever out there, but whatever he's got in the water. Man doesn't know nothing about no damn log rolling. The octopus of death and the acid-born shark, they got nothing on log rolling. So knock your tree down, roll your log, and hit magic missiles with little totem icons that you make mysteriously and from your own ideas. I think creating originality is very important. Now, when we get into the later editions of Dungeons and Dragons, we see a large sort of trend back and forth in 5th edition towards non-weapon proficiency. They change them a bit, but that's basically what they are, as opposed to the skill system that we see in 3rd, 3.5, and later Pathfinder, where you take skills like that and minimize them to the point that they are, for the value, the actual game impact value they have, they're almost worthless. So that's something important to note about the different feel, because an AD&D 1st edition game and an AD&D 2nd edition game are pretty similar, but a 3rd and 4th and 5th edition game, they all have a very different feel and a very different flavor to them. So it might be something you want to consider if you like that kind of simplicity in a rule set. Sadly, the combat rules are not simple in AD&D. They're confusing, and I'll tell you this because a whole bunch of old heads are going to jump in. Oh, they're easy. They are not easy. I've taught AD&D to hundreds of people, literally, and it's incredibly counterintuitive. And yes, I understand up and down, the weird ones, the normal ones, how THAC0 works, all of that. It's not intuitive, it's not easy to learn, and it's a huge turnoff. But that being said, the secondary skills alone encouraged a huge opportunity to break that stereotype. After you played for a while, no one wants to see the wizard in the robe and deep cow. No one. That character is butt. No one wants to see the fighter with the plate mail, the long sword, and the shield. It's just so... It's a parody of itself within a trope, and that's not cool. It's almost like you're not even playing a character, And the same thing, with that fighter as a lumberjack, he might be, out there with an axe, and maybe some hide armor. He's like, well, yeah, I got this hide and I got this axe. I know how to fight. I'm a big man. You want a soup bone? He's like, oh no, but he gets one anyway, and why wouldn't he? So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking for the most simplistic and background accentuating, thought-provoking skill set that you could find. I'm not saying it's the most thought-provoking, but it certainly can help accentuate background ideas in a very, very easy way. I would recommend you take a look at it and break it down into its usage and play around with it. I like it. Now as an adult, I like it way more Like if I play AD&D, I'll just like, okay, you guys use your non-proficiencies because the system is horrible. It was a great idea. It was a great move forward. But as it stands on now, non-proficiencies to me are absolutely unusable. I just can't use them. But a secondary skill, that makes sense to me. So that's the way I would rock and roll in AD&D. Plus, it just saves you time, which is great. You know, it makes making a character a little bit better. And even in the fact of rolling those dice and taking a random chance, if you don't really have a character idea, just pick a class and then just roll on that joint. You're like, oh, a wizard lumberjack, and you know what to do. Whoop that ass and roll along.